You are 17 years old, and the state has already decided how the next decade of your life will disappear. Not into college, not into a trade, not into freedom, into a uniform that does not fit, a rifle older than your father, and a military that does not exist to protect a nation nearly as much as it exists to protect a family. In most countries, joining the army is a choice, or at least a negotiation between duty and personal ambition. In North Korea, it is neither. It is extraction. The regime takes your body at the precise moment it becomes useful and returns it years later thinner, older, obedient, and stripped of anything that might have made you dangerous as an independent man. This is not a story about glory, rank, medals, or battlefield heroism. There has been no real war here since 1953. This is a story about hunger used as discipline, ideology used as surveillance, and promotion used as bait. It is about how a boy becomes a soldier, how a soldier becomes an instrument, and how even the men at the top live in fear of the one man above them. Because in the Korean People's Army, every step upward reveals a darker truth. The higher you rise, the more clearly you see that the system is weaker than it looks, crueler than it admits, and far more afraid than it wants the world to believe. And that is where your journey begins today. Before you ever touch a rifle, the state has already been shaping your mind for years. You grow up in a classroom where mathematics, grammar, and revolutionary mythology sit side by side, but only one of them truly matters. Numbers may help you pass a test. Loyalty is what keeps your family safe. From the time you are old enough to read, you are taught that the Kim family did not simply rule North Korea. They rescued it, built it, protected it, and continued to carry it on their shoulders like figures suspended somewhere between political leaders and sacred ancestors. You memorize dates the way children elsewhere memorize songs. The birth of Kim Il-sung, the accomplishments of Kim Jong-il, the leadership of Kim Jong-un. Their images are everywhere, not as decoration, but as a constant reminder that the state is watching, the party is permanent, and your own life is meaningful only when attached to theirs. History is not presented as a debate or even as a sequence of events. It is delivered as doctrine. The Korean War has one approved story. The outside world has one approved identity. America is the aggressor. The South is corrupted. North Korea stands alone, heroic and pure. At home, your parents do not speak freely because free speech inside a dictatorship becomes a private form of suicide. They do not tell you everything they fear. They do not tell you what military service will really take from you, but they know. Every family knows. When a boy approaches 17, the future narrows. There is no real discussion about college, ambition, travel, or choice. There is only the understanding that the state will come for him soon, and when the conscription notice finally arrives, it does not feel like an invitation to serve. It feels like the last step in a process that began years ago, back when you were still a child and thought memorizing loyalty was the same thing as believing it. The notice arrives without ceremony, but everyone in the house understands what it means. Your mother takes it with both hands. Your father reads it only once. Nobody argues. Nobody asks whether there has been a mistake. In North Korea, a conscription order is not a request that can be negotiated. It is the state announcing that your body now belongs somewhere else. You report to the induction center with other boys your age, all of you standing in lines that move too slowly and speak too little. Some try to look proud, some look terrified. Most have already learned the same survival rule their parents live by: never show more emotion than necessary. Officials process you with the efficiency of a system that has done this for generations. Your name is checked, your background is checked, your family loyalty is checked. Before you are trusted with a weapon, the regime wants to know whether your bloodline is politically clean enough to be useful. Then the stripping begins. Your civilian clothes are taken. Your hair is shaved. It falls to the floor in dark clumps, and with it goes the last visible sign that you were still just a student a few hours earlier. You are handed a uniform that does not quite fit, because the state can mobilize bodies more easily than it can clothe them. The fabric is rough. The boots are stiff. Nothing feels made for you. That is the point. Individual comfort would suggest that you still matter as an individual. The barracks smell like dust, wet fabric, old wood, and the sweat of boys who arrived before you. You meet men who have already been inside this system for years, and what strikes you first is not their discipline, it is their thinness. Their faces look older than they should, their movements are quick, quiet, economical, as if even energy has to be rationed. No one needs to explain what the next years will be. You can already see it in their bodies. By the end of your first day, your old life has not ended in one dramatic moment. It has been peeled away in steps, document by document, object by object, strand of hair by strand of hair, until almost nothing familiar is left. You have not yet learned how to obey, but you have already been made ready to disappear into obedience. Your first real lesson in military life is not discipline, not tactics, not patriotism, it is hunger. Hunger wakes up before you do. Hunger follows you onto the training ground. Hunger stands beside you in formation, lies down with you at night, and teaches you very quickly that every speech about honor sounds different when your stomach has been empty for too long. The ration is supposed to be enough. On paper, the army feeds its soldiers. On paper, the state equips the defenders of the nation with what they need to serve proudly. But paper is one of the regime's favorite places to hide its lies. What reaches your hands is smaller than what was promised, and what was promised was already barely enough for a growing young man expected to carry gear, march long distances, endure freezing winters, and perform manual labor for hours at a time. Rice when available, corn when necessary, less of both than your body demands. Some days the portions are merely inadequate, other days they feel insulting. Winter makes everything worse. The barracks are cold in a way that feels personal, as if the building itself has decided you are not important enough to keep warm. Fuel goes to higher priority units, and you are not part of a higher priority unit. You sleep packed beside other soldiers because body heat is one of the few resources your unit can still produce on its own. Blankets are thin, boots are worn, the cold enters through the walls, through the floor, through the fabric, and settles into your bones. In the morning, you wake stiff, tired, and still hungry. Training does not adjust itself to your weakness. You drill, you march, you run, you clean your weapon until your hands ache. Because a dirty rifle is not treated as a maintenance failure, it is treated as a moral failure. Inspection is never just about the gun. It is about whether you are sufficiently obedient, sufficiently alert, sufficiently useful. If you fail, punishment is immediate and physical. Beatings are not exceptional. They are part of the grammar of the place. Orders are spoken. Pain translates them into memory. And then there is the other education, the one that may consume as much time as combat preparation. Political study sessions stretch across the day, requiring you to memorize passages, repeat approved truths, and demonstrate enthusiasm that no one expects to be sincere, only visible. You begin to understand that the army is not merely training you to fight, it is training you to surrender your inner life. Your face, your posture, your voice, even your silence are all being measured for compliance. By now, survival has become a practical art. You learn who might share a scrap of food and who will steal it. You learn how to conserve energy, how to hide weakness, how to stand still without looking absent, how to look devoted without drawing the wrong kind of attention. The official command structure tells you who outranks you. Reality teaches you something else. The true commanding officer of your life is hunger, and every other order arrives through it. After a year or two, you stop expecting the system to make sense. That is when you become easier for it to use. By now, you have learned the obvious rules: salute correctly, keep your rifle clean, never complain where someone can hear you. But the deeper rules take longer to understand because they are not written in manuals. They live in pauses, facial expressions, and the careful management of what other people believe about your loyalty. This is the stage where survival stops being purely physical and becomes theatrical. You are promoted, perhaps to corporal, not because you are the strongest or smartest, but because you have shown what the system values most: reliability, predictability, correct emotion at the correct time. In North Korea, this does not simply mean obeying orders. It means performing belief in a way that reassures the state that your inner life is not a threat. Your family background matters more now. Songbun, the regime's social classification system, follows you everywhere even when nobody says the word aloud. If your ancestors were judged loyal, doors can open. If they were judged suspect, those doors remain locked no matter how disciplined or competent you are. Merit exists, but only inside a cage built by inherited political status. You begin to understand that your future may have been decided before you were born. The political officer becomes one of the most important men in your world. He is not there to improve your marksmanship or teach battlefield tactics. He is there to monitor belief. He watches who speaks with conviction, who hesitates during recitations, who looks distracted during ideological study, who fails to cry hard enough during ceremonies, who seems too quiet after hearing news from the leadership. In another military, these details might be irrelevant. Here, they can decide whether you are promoted, punished, or quietly marked for future suspicion. Self-criticism sessions teach you the final skill. You stand before others and confess thoughts you may not have actually had, weaknesses you know are safe to admit, failings calibrated to sound humble but not dangerous. Then you listen as others do the same. The whole ritual is less about truth than exposure. The regime wants to make privacy feel unnatural. It wants every soldier to become both witness and participant in the surveillance of everyone else. So you adapt. You clap when others clap. You nod at the right lines. You report small ideological slips before someone accuses you of hiding them. You learn to look sincere because sincerity itself is no longer the point. What matters is that your loyalty can be seen, recorded, and repeated on demand. You may not believe more than before, but you now understand something more useful. In this army, conviction is optional. Performance is survival. By the time you are trusted with authority over other soldiers, you have already learned the regime's most useful lesson. Suffering does not excuse you from responsibility. It qualifies you to impose suffering on others. You might now be a sergeant or something close to it, placed over a platoon of young conscripts who look the way you once looked. Too thin, too alert, too uncertain about what kind of place they have entered. You recognize the fear in them immediately. You also recognize how little that fear matters. You are responsible for their discipline, their work output, their attendance at political study, their equipment, and in some vague but impossible way, their physical condition. The state gives you accountability without resources. If your men are weak, that is your problem. If they are underfed, that is your problem. If they fail inspection, that is your problem. If one of them disappears, that becomes very much your problem. Authority in this system is not the power to solve anything. It is the burden of being punished for what cannot be solved. This is when you discover that the military's real daily function is often not preparation for war, but labor. Soldiers build roads, move earth, reinforce hillsides, pour concrete, repair flood damage, raise monuments, and dig tunnels into the mountains near the border. Some of these tunnels are meant to protect artillery, some are meant to protect command infrastructure. Some seem to exist because a superior officer wants progress to report upward. Whether the project is truly urgent depends less on strategy than on politics. Every project is described as important. Only a few are actually supplied as if they are. Your platoon may spend months underground with hand tools, cutting into frozen soil and rock with inadequate supports and improvised engineering. Accidents are inevitable. A cave-in is never just a tragedy, it is paperwork. It is blame. It is another reminder that the state values completion more than survival. A buried conscript becomes a problem to be explained, not a life to be mourned. You file the report. The work continues. Malnutrition turns ordinary illness into a constant threat. Tuberculosis moves easily through crowded barracks. Parasites spread through contaminated food and water. Skin infections, digestive problems, exhaustion, untreated injuries, all of it accumulates. There is no dramatic battle, no enemy assault, no heroic charge. Men disappear from service because their bodies simply begin to fail inside an institution that was never designed to preserve them, and sometimes a man runs. Desertion is rare because everyone understands the cost. If he is caught, the punishment can be public, brutal, and exemplary. If the authorities decide his escape was political, the consequences may spread outward to his parents, siblings, even extended family. In North Korea, guilt is contagious by design. The regime does not merely punish the individual, it punishes the bloodline so that fear can travel farther than the fugitive ever could. By now, you no longer react the way you once might have. That is the most disturbing change. You still see the hunger, the fear, the cold, the injustice, but you also have tasks to finish, names to submit, and younger men to drive forward. The system has not stopped hurting you. It has simply promoted you into helping it. And that is how it reproduces itself, by teaching the broken to supervise the breaking of others. Promotion into the officer corps looks, from below, like escape. You imagine better food, warmer rooms, greater authority, a life less exposed to the daily humiliations that define enlisted service. And in the most superficial sense, some of that is true. Your ration improves slightly. Your uniform fits a little better. Men stand when you enter. Your orders carry weight. But the illusion fades quickly because becoming a junior officer does not lift you out of the system. It places you deeper inside its contradictions. Before the promotion promotion is approved, your background is reviewed again, not your battlefield record, because there has been no battlefield, not your tactical brilliance, because tactical brilliance is less important than trust. Your family history is examined, your loyalty file is examined, your behavior during political study, ceremonies, and self-criticism sessions is examined. In a normal military, an officer is supposed to command men. Here, an officer must first convince the regime that he can be trusted not to think for himself while doing it. Once commissioned, you are given a platoon, sometimes made up of men you once served beside. That makes the transition awkward in ways no training manual addresses. They know where you came from, they know how thin you were, how cold you were, how hungry you were. And now you are expected to stand above them, not as a comrade with a little more experience, but as the face of authority. The regime does not care whether the role fits comfortably. It only cares that the chain of control remains unbroken. Your responsibilities multiply instantly. You must maintain discipline, oversee training, inspect weapons, track attendance, enforce schedules, and ensure that political education never loses priority. That last part creates a constant tension. Every hour spent rehearsing ideological loyalty is an hour not spent on marksmanship, maneuver, maintenance, or physical conditioning. You know this. Your men know this. The political officer knows this too. But the purpose of political education is not military efficiency. It is regime security. If combat readiness suffers, that is unfortunate. If ideological vigilance slips, that is unforgivable. Your salary is almost meaningless. On paper, you are now part of the leadership structure. In reality, your pay is not enough to support dignity, much less comfort. So you enter the economy that keeps the country alive beneath its official lies. You skim rations, you divert fuel, you trade favors, you sell access to supplies, you pretend not to notice certain thefts in exchange for a share. This is not deviance from the system. It is the hidden mechanism that allows the system to function. The state underpays you, underfeeds your men, and then silently depends on corruption to close the gap. That is when the last illusion dies. You realize the army is not failing because of corruption. It survives because of it. You're no longer just obeying a broken machine. You are helping lubricate it, and the higher you rise, the more dangerous that becomes, because now your survival depends on balancing three impossible things at once: military order, ideological obedience, and private dishonesty. You must practice all three every day and appear clean while doing it. By the time you become a senior officer, perhaps a captain, a major, even a lieutenant colonel, you are no longer close enough to the bottom to pretend you do not understand what is happening. You command a company, then maybe a battalion. Hundreds of men now exist inside your field of responsibility. Their rations, their labor assignments, their readiness reports, their discipline records, their ideological profile, all of it flows across your desk in forms, summaries, and evaluations that reduce human exhaustion into administrative language. This is where the curtain begins to lift. Not all at once, and not in a way that frees you. It lifts just enough for you to see that the system beneath the slogans is held together by fear, ritual, and mutual deception. From below, the army looked brutal. From here, it also looks performative. You attend more ceremonies now, more commemorations, more mandatory displays of emotion surrounding the birthdays of leaders, the anniversaries of the party, the founding of the military, the moments the regime has chosen to elevate into sacred history. None of these events are casual. Every movement is rehearsed. Every chant has rhythm. Every tear, every clap, every synchronized display of devotion is organized with the precision of a field exercise. In another country, loyalty might be assumed until disproven. Here, loyalty must be staged repeatedly in public because the regime trusts nothing that it cannot watch happening in real time. You begin to notice how deeply this performance governs careers. Officers are not advanced simply because their units function well. They are advanced because they are seen functioning correctly inside the political theater of the state. The right mentor matters. The right party connection matters. The right family background still matters. So does your ability to show enthusiasm without excess, confidence without arrogance, discipline without originality. A dangerous officer is not one who fails. A dangerous officer is one who appears capable of existing without total dependence on the regime. The political officers remain everywhere, even at your level, and in some ways their power becomes more menacing as you rise. A private may fear a beating. A senior officer fears documentation. A remark made in the wrong room. A hesitation noticed during a morning event. A subordinate's ideological problem traced upward into your chain of command. Files grow thicker over time. Nothing is really forgotten. The state archives not only disobedience, but insufficient intensity, weak applause, a facial expression held too long after bad news. In such a system, ambiguity itself becomes risky. You also learn the true function of arbitrary punishment. Sometimes an officer disappears because he has genuinely offended someone powerful, sometimes because he failed in a visible way, sometimes because the regime simply needs everyone else to remember that no rank guarantees safety. You hear stories, then confirmations, then silences. A brigade commander reassigned and never mentioned again. A colonel arrested. A party secretary removed. A man present 1 month and gone the next. His absence swallowed by the machinery as if it were ordinary. That is when senior service stops feeling like advancement and starts feeling like proximity. You are closer now, not to power in any secure sense, but to the place where power is manufactured. And once you see how much of it depends on fear and choreography, you can never fully believe the propaganda again. You can only help maintain it because by then your life depends on the same fiction as everyone else's. By the time you reach the level of colonel, the illusion is no longer merely cracked, it is gone. You command a regiment or a brigade, somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 men, enough lives under your authority that failure now has weight, but not enough power to protect you from the consequences of naming what you see. And what you see every day is that the military presented to the world and the military that actually exists are not the same organism. One is propaganda, polished and theatrical. The other is aging equipment, manipulated reports, exhausted manpower, and a chain of command built on fear of honesty. At this level, you begin receiving a broader picture of readiness, not the picture shown to conscripts in classrooms, and not the fantasy repeated in speeches, but fragments of the real one. Tank units, field machines, built on old Soviet designs and aging Chinese variants, armor that would struggle badly against the modern systems deployed south of the border. Aircraft remain symbols more than tools, because maintenance is poor, spare parts are scarce, and pilots cannot fly enough to master the machines they are supposed to use in war. Fuel shortages strangle training, ammunition allocations are limited, exercises are staged to look convincing to superiors, not necessarily to produce real battlefield competence. And yet one capability remains credible enough to frighten enemies and stabilize the myth. Artillery, thousands of guns, rocket systems, and hardened positions near the demilitarized zone aimed toward Seoul, a city dense enough and close enough that even a decaying force can still threaten terrible destruction in the opening hours of war. This matters because it gives the regime one sharp instrument inside a much duller military structure. It allows weakness elsewhere to hide behind the possibility of immediate devastation. A brittle army can still be dangerous if it possesses one tool capable of catastrophic effect. But your work is not simply to manage reality, it is to edit reality into a form that can safely move upward. You submit readiness reports. You certify equipment that is not fully serviceable. You describe units as prepared when you know training is incomplete, supplies are inadequate, and morale is performative at best. You do this not because you are uniquely dishonest, but because an honest report would function like self-destruction. If you state plainly that your brigade is underfed, undertrained, poorly maintained, and reliant on appearances, the problem will not be fixed. The accusation will move toward you. Every colonel understands this. Every general reading those reports understands it too. Everyone knows the numbers are polished. Everyone knows the claims are inflated. Everyone knows that the language of readiness has become a ritual rather than a diagnosis. But the fiction survives because telling the truth inside a dictatorship is rarely treated as loyalty. It is treated as sabotage. So the lies move upward in carefully measured increments, each level adjusting the performance just enough to remain believable, just enough to avoid punishment, just enough to keep the machinery running. This is the true architecture of the upper military. Not strength, but coordinated pretense. Not confidence, but managed fear. Not ignorance, but collective silence. By now, you understand something the younger soldiers never could. The army is not held together by faith in victory. It is held together by the terror of being the first man honest enough to say that victory, as described in the propaganda, may never have been real at all. By the time you become a general, you have reached a level of privilege most North Koreans will never even glimpse. You are no longer living like the boys in the barracks or the officers trading stolen fuel in back corridors. You have an apartment in Pyongyang, the capital reserved for the politically trustworthy, where electricity is more reliable, food is less scarce, and the streets themselves are part of the regime's stage set for foreign cameras. You may have a car, a driver, access to special stores, imported liquor, better clothing, better medicine, and educational opportunities for your children that ordinary families cannot dream of. From the outside, it looks as if you have finally escaped the machinery that consumed everyone beneath you. But privilege in North Korea is never ownership. It is temporary custody. Everything you have can be revoked by the same hand that granted it. That truth hangs over every benefit like a shadow. Your apartment is not proof of security. It is proof that your survival remains useful for now. Your children's future is not guaranteed by status. It is hostage to your continued performance. Even comfort becomes a form of pressure, because the more you are given, the more you stand to lose. At this level, the danger becomes more refined. A private fears beatings. A general fears erasure. You attend state functions where every expression must be calibrated. You clap on cue. You praise the leadership in language so absolute, it leaves no room for independent thought. You mourn publicly when required, and you do it with the knowledge that weak emotion can be read as weak loyalty. The man beside you is performing the same ritual, and both of you understand the unspoken rule. Rank may elevate you above the masses, but it does not place you above suspicion. You have also seen what happens when the system turns upward. Senior officers disappear. Powerful men are accused, purged, humiliated, executed, or simply removed from public life so completely that mentioning them becomes dangerous. Sometimes their offense is real, sometimes it is political, sometimes it is only useful to someone above them. The lesson is always the same. No service record is long enough. No devotion is convincing enough. No title is heavy enough to shield the neck beneath it. That is the final insult of power in this system. After decades of obedience, hunger, corruption, and performance, you arrive at the top only to discover that your rewards are real, but your safety is not. The higher you climb, the sharper the fear becomes. You have more to lose than ever before, and that is exactly why the regime trusts you least. At the very top of this structure sits the only man who does not have to pretend the army serves a broader national purpose. Kim Jong-un inherits command not through merit, not through battlefield achievement, and not through the slow accumulation of institutional trust, but through blood. That fact alone explains more about the Korean People's Army than any parade ever could. In a normal state, the military exists first to defend the nation and then to protect the government that nation chooses. In North Korea, the order is reversed. The military exists first to protect the dynasty, and only through that mission does it claim to protect the state. Every title Kim accumulates strengthens that arrangement. Supreme Commander, Chairman, General Secretary, head of the institutions that supervise the military, the party, and the state. The offices overlap because the system is designed to make separation of power impossible. No independent center of force can be allowed to emerge. No general can become too popular. No commander can remain too long in one post. No branch can exist without being watched by another. Promotions reward loyalty. Purges enforce fear. Rotations prevent trust from turning sideways into faction. That is why the military's enormous size matters less than its political design. The missiles, the artillery, the uniforms, the endless formations of soldiers, all of it projects power outward, but its deepest function points inward. It deters invasion, yes, but it also deters collapse from within. The army is a wall built around one family's rule, and every soldier, from the starving conscript on a hillside to the decorated general in Pyongyang, becomes one more stone in that wall. Kim understands the central truth of the system more clearly than anyone beneath him. The army does not need to be perfect. It does not even need to be fully ready for modern war in the way outside militaries define readiness. It needs to remain loyal, afraid, and dependent. That is enough to preserve the dynasty, and preserving the dynasty has always been the real mission. And then, after all the ranks, all the ceremonies, all the punishments, all the privileges, and all the fear, the system returns to its simplest form. A boy turns 17. He lives far from Pyongyang, in a town or village where the state is less visible in architecture but no less present in thought. He has finished school, he has memorized the same approved history, the same names, the same victories, the same myths. He knows the version of the Korean War he was taught. He knows what a good citizen is supposed to say. He knows military service is called an honor. What he does not know is how much of that honor will feel like hunger, cold, silence, and years that cannot be reclaimed. His mother understands more than he does. She has seen what comes back from the army. Thin men in worn uniforms, sons returned as strangers, bodies aged too early, eyes that have learned not to rest on any one thought for too long. She knows what 10 years can do to a life before it has properly begun. But knowledge inside North Korea is often private, and private knowledge survives by staying quiet. So she says what mothers in such systems must say. Be careful, obey, endure, come back. The notice arrives, the truck comes, the village watches without watching. The boy climbs aboard with others his age, carrying almost nothing, because there is almost nothing he is allowed to bring with him. He does not know yet that he is entering a machine designed not only to use him, but to reshape him into something safer, smaller, and more obedient than the person he might have become. The truck drives south toward the barracks, toward the wire, toward the border, toward the same cycle that has been repeating since 1948. And somewhere inside that moving line of boys is the next private, the next sergeant, the next general, and the next frightened man pretending not to be afraid. What does a system like this teach the world? That an army can be enormous and still be fragile. That power built on fear can survive for decades, but never without cost. And that the greatest weakness of a dictatorship is often the same thing that keeps it alive. Its endless need to control every thought, every face, every movement, every silence. North Korea's military may continue to march, parade, and threaten, but the deeper truth is harder to hide forever. Hunger leaves marks. Corruption leaves cracks. Fear leaves people loyal only for as long as they must be. And that raises the real question. What happens to a state when too many people inside the machine stop believing, but keep performing belief anyway? Does the cycle continue for another generation, or does it finally break under the weight of its own contradictions? The future of North Korea may depend less on the weapons it displays and more on how long this performance can keep holding. So what do you think? Could a system like this last indefinitely, or is it already decaying from the inside? Share your thoughts and your perspective in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share the video with someone who would find this story just as haunting.